Welcome everyone, Tactical Lich here. It's been a while since I ventured outside of Total Warhammer content, but today I'll be showcasing a new game called Mechabellum. It is an auto-battler, meaning that you don't actually control the units but instead deploy them on the battlefield and let the battle plays out. To win a battle, you must outsmart your opponent by thinking 10 steps ahead, trying to predict what they are going to do and counter them accordingly. Without further ado, let's jump straight into the battle and see how this game works. At the start of the battle, players would have to pick a starting loadout with a specialist giving them a perk and 2 starting units. I will be picking the one on the right, Aerial Specialist, allowing me to unlock new aerial units without paying extra cost. My starting unit would be Arclight and Sledgehammer. Arclight has a powerful plasma blast. It can obliterate blobs of enemy units, while the Sledgehammer is a heavy tank. First of all, it is of course rather tanky with a high HP pool, but also having a powerful gun that can also do area of effect damage. With all the area of effect damage, I need something with high damage for single targeting purposes, so I'll be unlocking some marksmen, a sniper unit, and drop them at the back. After summoning all the units I need, I'll be deploying them across the battlefield, trying to spread them out. One thing to note is that once you deploy a unit in a round, you cannot change their positioning in the next round. So players would have to be really careful with the placement of their units. Anyways, after placing the Arclights on the flanks, the Sledgehammers in the front, and then the marksmen in the middle of the formation, it is time to get the first round going. My opponent's starting loadout are some Sledgehammers and backed up by Fangs. Now the Sledgehammers are fine for me because my snipers, the marksmen, can snipe them out. The Fangs are an infantry mecha with a lot of numbers but not a lot of HP, so the area of effect damage from all the Arclights and Sledgehammers can quickly clear them out. However, if my marksman was stuck shooting them, then it would take ages for the marksman with low reload speed to pick them off. But because I was able to clear out the frontline units, I was able to secure the first round victory, meaning that my opponent will be taking damage equivalent to the value of remaining units on my end. Before the second round begins, both players will have to select a reinforcement in the same reinforcement pool. I'll be picking the subsidized Stormcaller, which is a unit that I'll be summoning in soon. This card allows me to call in the unit with 50 less supply. Now, even with the 50 supply required to unlock the unit, I can still summon 2 in the turn. As I have 400 supply and the Stormcaller unit only cost 150 each. Now for the unit itself, the Stormcallers are a rocket launcher artillery that can provide some very powerful long-range firepower support. Just placing them slightly behind the Sledgehammers, so the Sledgehammers will be absorbing the enemy attacks and the Stormcallers will be dishing out the damage from afar. Now the problem is that the right flank got obliterated by a missile summon. It is an ability that costs 50 supplies, allowing players to summon in a devastating missile attack. As you can see there, destroying my Sledgehammers and one of the marksmen, allowing my opponents to continue their push on my right flank. My left flank isn't having a good time either, as my opponent also picking Stormcaller this time actually managed to push back my units. And with that, only Stormcallers remain on the battlefield, which will be picked off by my opponent's marksmen. This round, my opponent will be taking the win and draining me of some of the hit points. So time for round 3. It is time to pick another reinforcement. This time I'll be picking the Supply Specialist, allowing me to get 50 supply more every single round. Now at this point of the battle, I'm not quite sure what I want to do just yet, so I'll be unlocking the Wasp unit, a light aircraft, as I do not need to pay additional supplies to unlocked aircraft. But instead of summoning the newly unlocked Wasp unit, I'll be calling in some Sledgehammers to provide a sturdier front line, just so they can absorb a few more hits, allowing my damage dealers at the back, the marksmen and the Stormcallers, to shoot a little longer. Now after shuffling the units around, I still have a couple hundred supplies left, so I'll be opening up the research center, getting some tech upgrades, providing extra attack and HP for my units, and then the battle commences. Things seem pretty even with the first volley of rocket exchange, but then my opponent's heavy units, the 2 rhinos, the melee mechas, comes in and starts slapping my Sledgehammers left, right and center. I'm trying to shoot back with the Stormcallers and Arclights, but they're not that effective against a heavy single entity. Eventually, I was able to work down the rhinos, but at this point I have no more frontline units to shield my fragile missiles at the back, and the Stormcallers, the marksmen, are all picked off by my opponent's upgraded marksman at level 2. You can see the blue color there, showing that they are an upgraded unit. Upgraded units have more HP, more armor, and also more damage. but you can't just upgrade a unit whenever you want. Instead, you have to allow them to accumulate enough experience by killing off enemy targets, and then you have to pay the supplies you need to upgrade them. Anyways, for round 4, there are some interesting reinforcement cards here. Heavy Hacker boosting up a hacker unit which can allow you to take control of your opponent's units. Basically a Wooloo in this game, but instead I'll be picking the Smoke Bomb instead to limit my opponent's range. This should give me a minor advantage on the left flank firefight. I'll be upgrading some of the units here, giving them additional damage HP, and also researching some technology here, giving my marksmen even more range, allowing my units to pick off enemies from an even greater distance while they themselves are sitting safely at the back. I contemplated to unlock new units, but in the end I decided against it and summon in 2 more marksmen instead. After shifting around the units a bit more, I decided to spend the remaining 200 supplies on upgrades and also call in a shield generator. It can provide protection against enemies' ranged attacks and is especially good at blocking sentry missile summons. However, my opponent dropped in the sentry missile on the other side of the field, so the shield was partially wasted. On the opposite side, you can see my opponent spawning in some hackers here. They're taking control of my units, but because they don't have the greatest HP pool, these Wooloo units got picked off by their former friends. However, my level 2 marksman on the left got Wooloo as well, forcing a friend to turn against friend, and as a result I lose a huge chunk of my remaining firepower, turning the entire engagement into a Stormcaller versus Stormcaller fight. Very unfortunately for me, my opponent's Stormcaller was able to bombard one of my towers, triggering a massive debuff to my army in terms of attack speed and defense. This gives my opponent enough edge to tip over the favor, winning the 4th round. For round 5, the reinforcement, I would be picking Heavy Armor, which is an equipment that I can install on one of the units, providing them with additional HP, and then I'll be upgrading my remaining units on the field. At the same time, I'm considering doing some tech upgrade on my Stormcaller. Looking at my opponent's army, I decided to go for Incendiary Ammo, which will ignite the ground surface, doing damage over time on anything standing on top of it. As for the units I'm picking this round, I'm actually quite hell-bent on getting even more ground forces despite having aerial units as an option. Now this might seem wasteful and dumb, but this is actually a tactic. By trying to commit more ground forces on my end, I'm luring my opponent into a trap, thinking that I'm just going to put more ground forces and my opponent is not investing anything on anti-air units. Well, perhaps the marksmen and hackers can target stuff in the air, but they are not enough to deal with what I'm cooking up. Anyways, 2 Stormcallers on the ground and the battle shall commence, with my opponent calling in a massive melting point, a laser beam single entity targeting unit. The special thing about this laser beam is that the longer it attacks the same unit, the more damage it does, making it very effective against something with a huge HP pool. However, none of my units are known for their HP, so the damage potential of the melting point is kind of wasted. With my Stormcallers firing everything they've got at the mobile fortress, I was able to work down the melting point, and the marksman at the back there with their superior range is picking off the Stormcallers one after the other. With my own Stormcallers providing fire support, I was able to win this firefight, finally securing victory after a series of defeat. Now we are on round 6, where we are getting significantly more supplies than before, which means I can actually afford buying more expensive reinforcement cards. After taking the incendiary bomb myself, I'll be dropping a few shield bubbles on my end because I know that my opponent can also pick the same ability. Installing these shield bubbles will help me to block any incendiary bomb damage, preventing the ground from being ignited. After installing the defenses, I'll be upgrading my units, perhaps unlocking some tech on my Stormcallers as well, giving them additional range, as I do have quite a bit of funds on my end. After upgrading the Stormcaller, I'm dropping in a couple more marksmen, really just trying to fake my commitment into the ground force. So far it has been working because my opponent doesn't seem to be investing into any anti-air firepower. As both players ready up, once again the battle commences. My opponent didn't pick Incendiary Bomb, but there are other missiles coming in and the shield are doing a lot of work, blocking the sentry missile and a lot of incoming Stormcaller shots. Unfortunately though, even with the shields tanking the damage, my enemy Stormcallers are just too much. The volume and damage of the missiles makes them very effective in working down any shields. My opponent's army composition is not bad either, with the melting point in the middle, the shield bubble absorbing all the damage, and then the hacker hacking one of my more elite sniper marksmen. My opponent's sheer volume of firepower overwhelmed my defenses. Also, unfortunately, my placement of my own Stormcallers was a little too close to my own towers, so that means some loose missiles actually hit the towers, dealing massive debuff to my army, allowing my opponent to take this win. At least there aren't that many units remaining on my opponent's side, so the damage to my hit points are not that bad. We will be moving on to round 7, and both players still have over 3500 HP, making it a rather long game. I'm tempted by picking the nuke here, but still, Tech Specialist reducing the tech upgrade cost by 50 makes it a very lucrative investment. Now, after upgrading some of my full XP units, I decided perhaps it is time to unleash my Air Force, calling in the light aircraft Wasp that I unlocked ever since the early game, dropping them onto the flank area, which is unlocked at the second round of battle, allowing flanking maneuvers and surprise your opponent. I'll be giving them the shield upgrade to give them a bit more survivability, plus my opponent doesn't have the units to deal with a swarm of aircrafts. Using the remaining funds, I'll be unlocking the Elite Marksman tag for the Marksman. This tag actually exists on other units, basically providing additional attack and range proportionate to their unit's level. Additionally, I'm dropping the Incendiary Bomb, igniting the ground and causing damage over time to anything that walks over it. Spending the last bit of funds on another Stormcaller upgrade, the battle begins. My opponent called in this unit called the Fortress, which has their own barrier tech upgrade, providing their own shields, but thankfully, my Stormcallers actually worked down the shields on the left, allowing the Incendiary Bomb to actually hit the ground instead of being blocked by the shield bubble. The frontline push is going rather even, but this is where the flank comes in. The Wasps that I summoned earlier took a few seconds to materialize on the flank, but after that they are just sweeping through the backlines with nothing to stop them, knocking down both towers, inducing an army-wide debuff to my opponent, and after that hunting down the Stormcallers one by one. Many of my units survive, meaning that the damage to my opponent's HP is rather significant this round. Now we're on round 8, not a lot of good tech this time, so I'll be picking the Orbital Bombardment, raining death and destruction upon my opponent. Although he does have a lot of shields, so most of that damage will be blocked. For the Wasps on the flanks, I'll be upgrading them and also giving them tech upgrades for shields and additional damage. More upgrades for the Stormcallers because I have the funds, and then a touch of Orbital Bombardment on my opponent's right flank. Their shields would be blocking a lot of the shots, but some damage would still be nice. At this point, I still have 750 supplies, and my 2 summon limit on every turn is still unused, so I'm doubling down on my Wasp flanking effort, placing them both on the right deployment zone, trying to overload my opponent's flank with sheer numbers. And then I spent some more funds on upgrades, but alas, I dilly-dallied for way too long, and the deployment time has ended. Now I have to wait for the next round to spend the rest of the money. Anyways, with all the long-range firepower, the battle is in full throttle right at the beginning. The flanks engagement Wasps trading against Mustang, a light vehicle with machine guns, very good against air units. And in the front line there, I'm being pushed back as the Orbital Bombardment isn't doing as much as I would like it to do. Still, the Wasps on the right managed to overload my opponent's flank and destroyed a tower, producing the debuff and also overwhelming the remaining marksmen. The ground forces are also getting picked apart by the machine guns from the skies. The frontal engagement wasn't great for me, but with the shields and damage upgrade on the Wasps, the flank was still a success, allowing me to win another round, doing more damage to my opponent's health. For round 9, I picked the Photon Emission tech, providing damage and negative effect resistance in the first 15 seconds of battle, which is actually a mistake. The ability itself isn't bad, but I was planning to bring out a unit that can do the exact same thing, so that was a bit of a waste of supplies. Anyways, I'm doing some unit upgrades with my abundant supplies. However, I don't want to keep the Wasps on the flank anymore, so I'll be upgrading them with a tech, allowing them to be redeployed every single round, moving them to the back of my field, as they will now stop functioning as a flanking force, but instead being a buffer unit to my actual heavy hitters, the Overlord, a massive gunship that has multiple purposes, one of them summoning more Wasps on the field. Now there are only 4 warps every half a minute, but these warps enjoys the same tech upgrades as the remaining warps on the field, so they can be a very valuable meat shield and disruption for the Overlord mothership. Seeing that my opponent only having 300 hit points left, I decided to drop every single ability on the field to give myself an advantage and seal the deal. Unfortunately for me, my opponent is dropping the Lightning Storm on the right flank, causing severe destructions on my forces. At least some of that damage is mitigated by the photon emission layer, and more importantly, the Lightning Storm was not able to disrupt my units because of the debuff immunity granted by the photon emission ability. Still, that potent Lightning Storm managed to even the odds, especially my opponent dropping in multiple melting points with the refraction point upgrade, allowing them to emit multiple laser beams onto multiple units, clearing out my warps in a quick hurry. At this point, this battle devolved into another firefight between my opponent's Stormcrawlers and my own Stormcrawlers and Marksmen. My opponent seems to have the advantage in numbers right now, but my Marksmen are also very lethal. Both sides are suffering massive casualties and things seem to be quite equal so far. Still, without any units left on the right side, my opponent was able to reach my tower, dropping that map-wide debuff on my army, and now I can't actually one-shot my opponent's Stormcaller with my own missiles, allowing them to bombard my elite Marksmen, finishing it off, and then pick off another Stormcaller, reducing that hit points damage to my opponent's health. So despite winning this fight, I actually was not able to finish off my opponent, and we are dragging it on to another round, round 10. For this round, I'm picking the Orbital Javelin, which can ignore my opponent's shields, directly damaging whatever's underneath. With my opponent's obsession on shielded units, this ability is very good, and I will be calling it right in front of the middle melting point, so it will be walking straight into the strike zone. Finally, on round 10, I remember to equip the health item onto one of my overlords. Then I'll be upgrading multiple units, including multiple marksmen, giving them even more firepower. But even so, I still have a lot of funds left, a whole 1,550 supplies left. So I'm simply spending all of them on Overlord, getting that photon emission upgrade, the same as the active ability a while back, and then getting another Overlord. That damage reduction should be able to cover most of my army, due to so many Overlords covering the battlefield. Then I spend the remaining 650 supplies onto another Warps unit, providing more buffer to my middle Overlord. Then the rest all goes into shields on the front line, covering my entire formation, basically trying to invest all the value into this battle and seal the deal. Final adjustments complete, let the battle begin. And right at the start of the battle, all kinds of effects are going off, even knocking out the shields on all those fortresses units. The photon emission are a great boon to my army right now, as they are blocking the hacking from the hackers. My opponent is trying his best to clear out my warp swarm with the mustangs with the melting points, but unfortunately, between the photon emission, the shields on the warps, and the wasp production line on the Overlord motherships, there's just not enough damage to deal with the sheer numbers of aircrafts. The charged beams on the melting points are very good at killing units with a huge health pool, but unfortunately, every time it switches target, it will have to restart the charging, starting from the lowest damage setting. So swarming the melting points with sheer numbers, forcing it to change targets every time it kills an enemy, makes it rather ineffective. With the help of the Stormcrawlers and Marksmen, I was able to pick off all my opponent's anti-air firepower, leaving the Overlord in the skies unstoppable. There were enough units on the field to eliminate the loss of my opponent's HP, allowing me to secure this final victory. So there you have it, Mechabellum, a simple but very fun strategy game. No complex controls, just that you need to be smart about your every move. It has some amazing visual designs, and players are able to see the giant mechas duking it out on the battlefield. Personally, I'm enjoying this game a lot lately, and viewers, I hope you are having fun as well. I might do more videos in the future, but let's see how it goes. Anyways, that's all for today, and thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.